James had always been a man of ambition, driven by the need to complete everything he started. Whether it was a project at work, a task at home, or even a hobby, he felt an urgent pull to finish things perfectly. But there was one thing that always eluded him: the 1,000-piece puzzle on his dining room table. He had spent weeks working on it, his fingers flicking through the pieces with a mixture of frustration and determination. He'd sort the pieces by color, by edges, by shapes. Yet the final pieces, the ones that would bring the whole picture together, never seemed to fit. Every night, he found himself hunched over the puzzle, rearranging the pieces in futile attempts to complete it, only to end up leaving it unfinished again. One evening, as he sat staring at the pieces, feeling the familiar frustration rising, a knock came at his door. It was his neighbor, an older man named Haruto, who had recently moved into the building. James had always admired Haruto's quiet demeanor and calm presence, a stark contrast to his own restlessness. "I noticed your puzzle," Haruto said, with a slight smile, glancing at the half-completed scene on the table. "How's it going?" "It's driving me crazy," James replied, running a hand through his hair. "I just can't seem to finish it. Every time I think I have it figured out, something doesn't fit." Haruto stepped into the apartment and took a slow look at the puzzle, his eyes soft but sharp, as if reading the silence between the pieces. He didn't offer advice immediately, but instead sat down in the chair next to James. "Do you mind if I ask you something?" Haruto asked after a pause. "Go ahead," James said, feeling a little perplexed. "What would happen if you left it unfinished?" Haruto's question was simple, yet it struck James like a gong. Would the puzzle be any less beautiful? Would the world change if it didn't have an ending? James stared at the puzzle. For the first time, he realized that his obsession with completing it, perfectly, with no pieces left out, was causing him more stress than satisfaction. The puzzle, instead of being a source of enjoyment, had become a symbol of his inability to find peace until everything was just right. "I don't know," James said slowly, as if tasting the thought for the first time. "I guess I've always been taught that finishing things is important, but maybe I've been too focused on the end." Haruto smiled gently. "Life is a bit like a puzzle. We spend so much time searching for the perfect pieces to complete the picture, but we forget that the beauty of the puzzle lies not in the final result, but in the process itself." James sat back in his chair, reflecting on Haruto's words. The pieces in front of him weren't mistakes or failures. They were part of the journey. He could continue putting the pieces together, yes, but he didn't have to do it with the pressure of completion looming over him. In that moment, the need to finish felt less urgent, and he felt a sense of freedom he hadn't realized he had been missing. Haruto stood up to leave, pausing at the door. "Remember," he said, his voice calm and wise, "sometimes it's not about reaching the end. It's about appreciating where you are in the moment." The door clicked softly behind him, and James sat in silence, looking at the puzzle. He no longer felt the pressure to force the pieces together. Instead, he began to play with them, rearranging and shifting them in a more relaxed way, savoring the act of discovery. Each piece that fit brought him a little more joy, but there was no longer a rush to complete it. As the weeks passed, the puzzle remained on the table, always in progress, always unfinished. And James, for the first time in a long time, found peace not in the final picture, but in the quiet moments of putting it together. The puzzle was never meant to be finished perfectly. It was a reminder that the journey, imperfect, messy, and full of lessons, was just as valuable as the destination.